Welcome to the Edom Museum Story Hour featuring Gary Hayes. And today, Gary's going to share with us lots of interesting information, and we are looking forward to hearing from him. So I'm just going to turn it over to Gary. And feel free to make donations as you leave to the Edom Museum, because we're going to try to add technology so you can see this video and others. Have a great experience.
Very well done.
Thank you, Madam Producer. Well, what I want to do today is cover how much I can about the life of Quanah Parker. And the reason I'm no special expert on Quanah Parker, except I became interested in it and I read a lot, so I guess I know. Now today's a test to see how much of what I read I remember. But it started when I went to the museum over here a few years ago, and I found a book there. It was a novel, and I flipped through it, and about the few pages I saw, it was things like they were inaccurate, Hollywoodized, I call it. And I think I exceeded my authority, and I took that book out of the museum because I said it's not history, it's a novel. So then I started trying to read what was more authoritative. I had a little training in history years ago, don't remember the history, but I remember that you need to go back to the original source when you can, as close as you can. So that's what I've tried to do. Most of what I'm doing today is from one book. It's just my refresher because it's well documented. And I trust most of what's in there.
What's the name of the book?
Empire of the Summer Moon. It's a very good book. Gwynn, S.C. Gwynn. I'll let you look at the book, when we finish, when it wants to look. So I better get started here because I think I'm limited on time.
Very limited.
Yes,
sir.
okay. Now, that's my director, producer there, director here, cameraman too. All right, the way I intend to do this is to talk a little about the Comanche tribes, also about the Parker family who was settled down here and a little below here. And I'll have to talk about the Texas Rangers and the U.S. Army, all involved in this. And just a few of the battles during his time. And then kind of the end of the story. So let me start with the Comanches. You see my map here. Can anyone see this pink oval? And the hotter pink was what was their territory that they completely controlled. The lighter pink is depicting their raiding area. And you notice, actually they went outside this sometimes because they went to these places, well outside, this place outside. But that varied a lot depending on where the frontier was. But initially now, the Comanches they came from way up northwest, like in the Idaho area. But in the 16th century, maybe 17th half, they were on the eastern slopes of the mountains of Wyoming to the edge of the plains here. And they were not very dominant tribe. They weren't that good of fighters because they got run out of where they were. And there was a time when they ran into they got exposed to a new technology. Does anybody can guess what this new technology? You got it, horses. So the Spanish had brought some horses by then and lost a lot of them, and Mustangs were loose on the plains here. Plus, a lot of them got stolen out of Mexico too. But the thing about the horses is that the Mustangs were well suited to this area, or that area, West Texas. They actually started, it's believed, on the plains, the steppes of Asia. And they were same kind of territory as West Texas. Eventually they got migrated to, North Africa. And I think maybe they mixed with a little Arabian, that kind of stuff. But they ended up in what I call Morocco, where the Moors invaded Spain. They took them to Spain. A lot of them got loose in Spain, and there they developed in the same kind of a territory as West Texas. And the importance there is that they were small, able to go long distances, live on grass only, and go without water a while. All that made them well suited to West Texas. And the Army's horses were, needed to be fed grain and maybe couldn't go as far as fast. So that was an advantage that the Comanches had. So once they got the horses, they were able to dominate other tribes that were in this area. They pushed the Apaches out of this part of Texas. And the New Mexico Indians, they pushed them back to New Mexico, basically. And this dark pink area was their empire, basically. They had control of it. And the Spanish were trying to occupy this area, and they were held back a long time by the Comanches. It's also believed that that's the reason when Stephen F. Austin brought the settlers in to East Texas to start, and the reason that the Spanish and or Mexicans later wanted the Anglo settlers is to help them fight the Comanche, settle for the Comanches, and I guess it worked. It didn't work out that well for the Mexicans, but it worked. All right, that's the Comanches. And now let me talk a little about the Parkers. So early settlers of this area, the Stephen F. Austin thing, 1833 came this family of Parkers, whole bunch of brothers, Red, John, Silas, 6 or 7 of them. And they established what's called Fort Parker. It's a family fort, 1 acre. It had cedar posts pointed on the top, and it even had blockhouse on 2 corners, and overlooking blockhouse. And it was better than some of the Army forts that came along later. Maybe not bigger, but it was better. Problem with this is they had the front gate open. And in the year of 1836, I know I keep bringing up years, but it's kind of important to me. A lot of things happened in a certain year at the same time, and one affected the other. Does anybody know what happened around here in 1836? Alamo, San Jacinto, all that was all in 1836. Well, so was the raid on Parker's Fort. That's where the Comanches went outside of their area, as a matter of fact, to to right down here below us where Fort Parker is. And like I said, the gate was open. I don't know why. A lot of the men were in the field working, and in East Texas, the field's not visible. You know, it's through some woods. But two of the brothers were there, I believe, and they met Indians at the gate. Hopefully, not to get sidetracked, but we don't know the reason they had the gate open like that. But one story is that one of these brothers was a kind of a horse trader. And my suspicion is that he might have been, the Indians might have come to trade horses. You know, they steal horses, trade them back to the whites. And some explanation like that they had the gate open and Indians just walk up there and met them. So the real reason they came may have been saying that they were going to trade horses or something, but they really came to look inside the gate and see how many people were there, what the setup was. So when the brother went back in and got his gun and came back out, and it didn't help much. End result was they shot him, and they raided the place inside. They ended up taking some captives, and one of them was an adult woman, and one was a 9-year-old girl called Cynthia Ann Parker, and also some younger brother who probably did not survive the trip north. But Cynthia Ann did. She went to the Comanches as a child. She grew up with them. She ended up married to Chief Peter Nakona. The boots are named after him, by the way. And she was the mother of Quanah Parker. Let me check my notes here and see if I didn't go down the wrong trail. During this time, I think I need to cover the Texas Rangers. They were a big part of this, what's loosely called the Comanche Wars. It started with the surveyors that Stephen F. Austin would send out to the fringes of the settlements, mapping the land, and they would have basically a guard person to go with them. They called him a ranger. And eventually they got, when the Texas became independent, they had a governmental authority sometimes. And they developed into what we know as the Texas Rangers. One of these Texas Rangers was called Jack Hays, spelled Hays. As a child, I always wanted him to be a relative of mine because his name was spelled the same, and the only Hayes I knew around here that spelled it the same were my relatives. And turned out to be he was not. He was here earlier than my grandfather came from the South. So if there's a connection, it's way back there. In any case, the reason I mentioned him, besides the fact that I like his name, was that initially the Texas Rangers fought with 2 pistols that were single shot and a rifle that was single shot. So, they if they used up all their ammo, they had to either have somebody cover them or risk reloading time. But Jack Hays is one who took the 5-shot Colt pistol. It was the initial invention that Sam Houston had ordered for the Texas Navy, believe it or not, and they didn't want them. So Jack Hayes and the Texas Rangers said, we'll try them. And he liked it because obvious reasons. It was 5 shots. They had to reload a certain way. With a new cylinder, it was a lot better than the old way. So they used those and they learned to fight the Comanches like the Comanches fought, which was a lot more effective than the way the Spanish and later the U.S. Army fought them. And down the road, a year or two later, this Jack Hayes was for some reason in Washington, while Texas was a state, country. And he ran into this Samuel Colt and gave him, they discussed how to improve that weapon. And he ended up with the 6-shot, big heavy, the one you see in all the Western movies. And it became thousands of them in the West. But initially it was only the Texas Rangers who bought that order. So now we're talking about 1844, 45. Texas was annexed. Then in there you had the Mexican-American War, which I'll get off of Jack Hayes pretty soon, I'm sorry, but he took some Texas Rangers and fought with the U.S. Army in the Mexican-American War. At first, the generals didn't want them because he knew they had discipline problems with these Texas Rangers. But he was convinced to take them because they cause trouble, but they fight well. So Jack Hayes got back from that, and he heard about the Gold Rush. He went to California. So he's out of the picture now, except that for his contribution was that Colt 45 and the methods that the Texas Rangers used to fight the Comanches.
They had an old saying back then, one mob, one ranger.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was actually that was a little later. They were helping the sheriffs when by that time they'd come to the county seat and look for the riot, right?
Story was the Rangers showed up at a riot, and the sheriff said, well, if there's only one of them, you want a Ranger, we want a riot.
That's right. That's it. Yeah. All right. So I guess now I'm supposed to talk about Quanah. He hadn't been born yet, so I better get to that.
Good question, Gary.
Yeah.
Where was Fort Parker exactly?
Right here. See that square?
Yeah. Isn't it like Mahia?
Yeah, it's very near Mahia.
Yeah.
And if you go to there's Corsicana. See that?
The mounds there.
And it's just, if you go south from
On
Corsicana,
the Navasota River.
you'll hit it. Yeah, it's really not that far from here.
Parker County.
Yeah, I've been there.
No, Parker County's up here
Yeah.
somewhere.
It's in the Panhandle.
Yeah, but
They've actually got a rebuilt Fort Parker down there now.
yeah, I've seen a picture of it. I want to go. I hadn't go yet, but
It's
that's
a
on my
state
list.
Historical place, yeah.
It's on my list. My bucket list. I better go pretty quick, huh? So,
Judge, why did he take the name Parker instead of Nakona?
I don't know. He's not around for me to ask him. But I don't know. I really don't know. Except there's a lot more to the story, you know. What I'm covering today is mostly, I'm going to wear most of you out anyway. But it'll end at when he went into the reservation and became a little more involved with the, you know, the Anglo-Americans. But he was always wondering about his, the Parker family, and he didn't know he didn't know until it was over what had exactly happened to his mother. He saw her captured, they say. And let me get to that anyway and answer questions at the end. Huh? So, Cynthia Ann was, like I say, she adapted to the Cheyennes, and she became what she considered a Cheyenne. She never wanted to leave. But a group of Texas Rangers, I think it got reported where they thought they had seen her, and they went to that village, and sure enough, they found her. And it turns out this was at the, what's that river? Somebody help me? Peace River, right in here. It's a little tributary that runs into the Red. And when they went to this, that village, they tracked them to there, one of the raiding parties, they tracked them to there. And they thought they had the village, but really was just like a base camp where it was mostly the women there, slaughtering and skinning and butchering buffalo. And the main camp was a little farther up. So when they attacked that village, it was mostly women, and one of them was Cynthia Ann Parker. Different reports about how it went and whether or not Peter Nakona was there. But I'm trying to go mostly by the Saul Ross's report, who was the captain of that ranger bunch. And he says that he shot a person on the back of a horse. There were two people riding. And when that person fell off, they pulled the rider off, who of course hit on his feet. And some people think that was Peter Nakona. He later was killed in this skirmish here. Some people reported that he lived and he was seen later. But the main story is that Saul Ross one. And I guess, let me see if I can tell what I skipped there. Well, that was about Peter, but Cynthia Ann was on another horse, and she had the baby with her, was her daughter. It's called Prairie Flower. And she got captured by reportedly Saul Ross, and he saw this other group that I told you about, the two riders, and he has stationed somebody to watch her when he went and did that, shooting the person off the back of the horse and pulling the other one off. And I'm going to jump back here. I apologize. I knew I would get lost. That's why I had to make these notes and I didn't follow them real. But there's a lot more to say about the horses that the Comanches bonded with so well. It was not only that they had the horses, but in a short span of like 50 years, they learned to go from, grubbing, small game hunting Indians to the rulers of the plains up here. And it was all because of the horse, not only the horse, but the way they adapted to the horse themselves. And that's why I made that comment that, of course, that person who was pulled off landed on his feet. They could do more with the horse. And in case I forget to say it later, there were U.S. generals, post-Civil War, generals who were fighting this area, who had been, studied warfare, and several of them said that they were the best light infantry in the country, best light infantry force, some of them said, in the world. I don't know if they knew about Attila the Hun and them, but very similar horses, as a matter of fact. So they were best with the horses. So now Cynthia Ann, she was rescued by these Texas Rangers. She never wanted to be rescued. She always wanted to go back. She lived a miserable life the rest of her life. She didn't know what happened to her boys, and she wanted to go back, and this Parker family wouldn't let her, of course. So at the time that happened, Quanah was 12 years old. His brother was 10. They were in the woods at the edge of the village, and they saw some of this happen. And they escaped after the kind of skirmish was over. So they knew that the main camp was up ahead. These two boys went all the way to the main camp. We know because they were tracked by, anybody ever heard of Charles Goodnight? He was a tracker, and he was one of the few white men who could track that well. And he tracked these two boys till he found the village, and he saw the size of the village. He said, "Whoa." And that's as far as he went. He came back. But we also matched that up with Quanah's interviews later, where he would say things like, when the message came to the main camp about the loss of all their supplies and buffalo meat and the women in that base camp, that there was big pandemonium, and he reported all that. He didn't say that he was the one, but he and his brother were the ones who brought that message, because he connected Goodnight's story with his story after. He just didn't really want to admit that he had been there, and that his father was there. So now, back to Cynthia Ann. They brought her back with a stop at Fort Worth to take her picture. Actually, I think they took her back to Fort Worth and got that picture, but I don't have it. But many of you have probably seen that picture of the short, cropped black hair that was cut off because she was mourning, actually. And so I do want to mention it impacts Cynthia's story, the fact that this frontier, we'll call it, where the settlers could go and maybe survive, go a little far and not survive, that's what I call the frontier, and it pulsed between this one here and somewhere out in here, You can see later, if you can see those little black things right there, that's a line of forts that was at one time the frontier. But this thing went back and forth, and here's why. 36, you had the Texas Rangers who were just chasing them chase the raiding party to their camp, try to punish them. Maybe they won. Often they didn't always. But it was kind of kept a check on the frontier. Then you had the Civil War, for one thing, especially in the Civil War. A lot of the people went away fighting in the South, and so the frontier went back to the east more. And then after the war, the Army would come and push them back some more. So what I'm getting at is that frontier varied. It wasn't a certain place and stayed there. So when the Parker family wanted to keep Cynthia Ann from escaping back to the Comanches or someone coming and rescuing her, they moved her around. They had, by this time, the Parker family had spread out different farms there. And one reason was they moved her around for that. Another was she was a lot of trouble to keep because she was unhappy. She wanted to go. She tried to escape and all that. So at one time, they had her farmed out to like a younger brother, nephew, something like that, who lived on Slater Creek, a little farm on Slater Creek. Does anybody know where Slater Creek is?
That's right here, 2339, going like to Calendar Lake.
Okay. It springs up at a spring south of Ben Wheeler. I've seen that. It runs to what's now Calendar Lake. And it's one of our better creeks around here. Larry Murphy, you know it.
Oh, well.
All right, one of our better creeks. And they had to dam it up, mess it up. But it's okay. That's just me.
Damn shame.
So I know a little about Slater Creek. Now, in spite of what you may have heard around here, I was not here at that time. And neither was my mother. But she was much closer to that time than I. And she was born and raised on the banks of Slater Creek. So they know all about this Cynthia Ann history, verbal history, at that time. So the connection, as close as we get to the Edom Historical Society, which caused me to pick up the book, right, was that the little girl died of pneumonia one winter when she was 3 or 4 years old. They buried her in Asbury Cemetery, which is 4-point-some miles from Edom. Calendar Lake, the creek's actually 5 miles, so it's just the side of the creek. So my mother knew the story, as did many other early people here, and I guess that's one of the reasons I was interested. It was common knowledge that the little girl was buried there. In fact, I came back from the Air Force and I went to that cemetery. I knew I couldn't find Jack Hayes because he wasn't buried there. But I thought I could find Little Prairie Flower. No, I didn't know at the time till I researched later that she had been disinterred, and so had the mother. The mother lived a few more years till 1871. She was rescued in 60, so she did 11 years with the Parkers, farmed out here and there. And she also died of pneumonia. One of those, let me sidetrack here. One thing I didn't like about that novel was it said that the little girl died, she was still nursing at the breast. She died because Cynthia didn't have buffalo meat in her diet to make the proper milk. Well, I might have bought that story if it was a Comanche woman who had, adapted with the buffalo for a couple of 100 years. But this was a Anglo-American woman who could produce milk on cornbread and ham, right? Which is what the Parkers had. Peas, cornbread, and ham. So that's kind of when I threw that book down, I think. But,
Gary,
yeah.
as the story goes, my great-grandfather, Samuel Murphy, who started the first school around here,
Yeah.
he taught Prairie Flower in school when she was just very small.
Okay, good. I didn't know that. I knew that that some relative of hers, they said, what I read, had gone to school at Edom. I didn't know it was Prairie Flower.
Yeah.
But
Well, I thought she was older than 3 or 4 when she died. I thought she was like 8 or 9.
I read 9, yeah.
well, that's possible because you know, I tried to keep track of the years here, but you know, your different stories, they overlap sometimes. In fact, I dropped a few chapters of the story because I couldn't make the dates match. So I figured it might not be true. But yeah, that's quite possible because let me look at the dates here.
And they're both buried in Tahlequah, aren't they?
Still.
Fort Sill,
Yes, later after,
all 3 of them.
yeah, I'll get to that if I don't lose myself. But later, after he was on the reservation, you don't call it sued, but what's it called? He petitioned the state of Texas that he could disinter both the sister and the mother, and then he buried them up in his place in Oklahoma. Okay, where was I? That was Cynthia Ann. And now let me go back to Quanah. How long did I go before I got to Quanah? Does anybody want a break or?
You wanna take a little, like, let's take 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
Yeah, it's fine.
What time is it now?
2:45.
So let's get back together at 3? Is that good or not?
Quarter hour?
I think it's so funny.
Huh?
5 minutes? It's 5:45, what do y'all say?
10 minutes,
Okay, 10 minutes. It'll take,
potty break.
I know it'll
Like,
take,
need a drink or anything.
it'll take at least 5 minutes to get y'all seated. You saw how it was when it started?
Be back in your seat before 3 o'clock.
Okay, very good.
Dips, cups in your hands, sips and bites, delicious drinks, and so much more. We want to thank, once again, Gary, for his research, his humor, and his passion for Edom and the Edom metropolitan area. And I'd also like to just throw out, like, Larry Murphy over here is a wealth of knowledge. One of the things that he pointed out, and Larry is the grandfather that you spoke of, his name again, that taught
Mr.
Prairie
Murphy.
Flower, Mr. Murphy.
Mr. Murphy?
His portrait is in the museum, and it's in this very special frame that's called bubble glass. And we're gonna put a plaque up and tell more about that. So thank you all for coming by the museum to see. But Gary Hayes is one of the great legends of all Edom, and we're gonna turn it back over to him and.
But nothing like high expectations here.
Well, you cleaned up good.
Yeah,
Thank you, Gary.
all right. Well, I appreciate that, and you know, I forgot to mention in the beginning that I saw a few people in this audience who may know more about this than I do, but they're just not willing to get up here, you know. So, and I am. But Larry Murphy is one who reminded me about this Edom school, but also he reminded me in the break that there was an older man who lived up on 314 called Hut Cawthorn, and when we were kids, he was an old man. So you know it was a long time ago, right? So he would tell us stories about the trading with Comanches who would come out of the Natchez woods, you know, from left over from that other battle that was here, which we'll have to have a session about that sometime too. Maybe not me. Maybe that was Cherokees. Maybe somebody else who knows more. But he also, Larry says he also was the one who showed them later where little Prairie Flower was buried in Asbury, because you know there was the only markers they used in those days put a big rock, you know, or no marker at all. But he dated far enough back that that he knew the story.
Well, Gary, I don't think I interject too much, but, gentleman came in my store, like 20, 30 years ago. Jim Ray, he was a Texas Ranger, and actually his bust is in the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame. And, he had been a Texas Ranger since like 1936. And he was part of the group that came there, and he was leading the procession that took Prairie Flower from here to Fort Sill.
Uh-huh.
And he said that when they dug up what was her grave, there really weren't any remains.
Yeah.
The acid soil out here just dissolved everything.
Well, and she
Took
was-
sand out and took it.
Yeah.
But
Well, if it satisfied Quanah, it was okay.
they did it to satisfy the family
Yeah.
in history, I guess.
Yeah, also his Parker family too. Sometimes I forget he had two families, right? All right, so where did I end this? On Cynthia Ann dying? Is that where I stopped? So back to the river raid there. And Quanah and his brother went to the main village, like I said. And so a little bit about his early life is that when he got up there, he was an orphan. His father was dead as far as we know. His mother was gone. He didn't know where. So he claimed later that orphans didn't fare well in the Comanche village because there was really nobody to look after them, you know. And so he had a hard time. That's part of what made him a tough warrior later on, I think. But he survived it. And here, let me back up. I'm sorry about this, but let me back up to when he was younger. I want to tell you how Comanche boys were raised. They didn't do any work. The women did all the work. And the young boys were free to wander around. And but they started getting trained by the older men in the camp, and mostly first about horses. When they were 4, they were riding a pack horse. By the time they were 5, they had a pony of their own. By the time they were 6, they were breaking colts. And after that, all their teenage years, from there to teenage years, they were the horse herders. They took care of the herds. And believe it or not, some of these big villages would have with them 3,000 horses. And, you know, it varied, but at the best times they had 3,000 horses. And so if you ever wondered why they had to move every week or so, it's because the horses ate all the grass. Never mind the buffalo, they chased the buffalo too. But so that was a big job, herding the horses and keeping them from being stolen or running off. And then they taught them to shoot the bow and arrow and all that stuff. So by the time his mother was captured there, he was 12, his brother was 10, and they went to this other village. The brother, I believe he died of some illness, you know, while he was still a boy. I don't know for sure. But Quanah grew up under those conditions, and it's believed that he became oh, by the way, he said other orphans were not treated well in the Comanche camp, especially those who were half white, okay? So, you know, prejudice goes both ways, I guess. But it's believed that he became a warrior at 15. His first raid was with 30 warriors. They went southwest from, believe it or not, Kansas to San Antonio.
Wow.
And with 30 warriors, he was with them. Somebody else was chief at that time. They stole the horses. They rode hard for 3 days and 3 nights. Nobody could catch them the way they went. And they came back with a large herd of horses and 2 scalps because two guys happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time on the way back. About the horses, I probably didn't mention that this was their wealth. They didn't have a bank account with money in it, but however many horses they had, the more horses they had, the wealthier they were. So that's why they were often stealing horses. Second raid went from Oklahoma to New Mexico, like in here to New Mexico. They stole a bunch of mules, and they used mules too for pack animals when they moved the village. They used a lot of pack animals, and the horses pulling those travois. I can't speak French, but I think it's travois. And that's the way they moved. And that raid wasn't quite as successful. They ran hard with the mules and stopped for a rest, and they all went to sleep, and the mules scattered. So they had to round them up. But they regained them, and they came home with most of the mules. Third raid, they say that he went on was to Mexico, and it wasn't all that successful because times were getting harder. They met a lot of hostility, believe it or not. Can you believe that? They met some hostility and didn't get many horses. So I just go over some of that so you understand how he developed from a 15-year-old to become a war chief at about 20. And the way, a couple of ways that happened was they were on a raid with, let me get the name of this guy. Right now I forgot the name. Oh, it's Bears here, the chief. But they went to, everybody knows where Gainesville is, right? Right up there north of Dallas, Fort Worth. And they sold a bunch of horses, and they were heading back this way. And they got caught because they had been, Gainesville, that settlement was pretty close to Fort Richardson. But you know where that is too. And the soldiers caught them. So they had a little battle there, maybe a big battle, and the chief got killed. So normally when the chief was killed, or even the medicine man, but especially if the chief killed, they said, okay, our medicine's bad, something's wrong here, we're going to quit. And they would usually retreat, break up. But Quanah took over and said, swing the horses, let's cross the river. And they crossed the Red River, which is no mean feat, a mean feat, and got away from the soldiers. So once they camped that night, they elected him the new chief. And there's another story, which I believe they're both true, because it was a different group, the band was a different group of warriors. But they had find the notes on this battle. I don't think I have notes, so you'll have to get this. But they had a battle where they ran off horses, and the soldiers sent out a couple of patrols, 6 or 8 soldiers, to track back some of the horses. And they were running this little group of Indians up a trail, and Quanah peeled off and didn't go with the rest of them, and he hid beside the trail and killed not one but two soldiers with his 14-foot lance as they rode by. And so not only the U.S. Army people behind saw that, his own warriors up ahead saw that, so they chose him as leader too because of his bravery and his abilities. And I probably didn't cover this, but when they would start out, like his first activity as a warrior, they didn't have hard and fast, big chief in control of the whole tribe. It was if he could get together 12 or 15 young warriors, they might go on a raid, and if they got horses, they were a better status. They had some money, they had some fame, and that's the way they. And the one who could lead them best, would come the chief, and that's the way he became the chief. Okay, most of this story, is kind of a tragedy, right? But there's one that I would like to tell that's more amusing, and it's Quanah's elopement. Remember, he was an orphan when he went to this main tribe, so he didn't have a father with horses. He didn't have an uncle or anybody like that. So when it came time to marry this one that he wanted to marry, named Tonarchy, and here's the deal: he only had one horse to trade, to buy her with, and he had a rival whose father had 100 horses, and he had given the boy 10 horses. So Quanah and the girl said, this is not going to work. So he went around to all the warriors that he'd been running with, and they knew he could steal horses, so they would loan him 2 or 1 of mine, 3 of mine, until he got 10 horses. So he went back, and by this time, it's a small village like Edom. The rival knew that he had gathered up 10 horses. So he got his father to give him 20 horses. So Quanah and this Tonarchy said, this ain't going to work, we're never going to get there. So Quanah said, well, we'll just have to elope. Well, elope sounds okay, except in that tribe, if you eloped, you didn't pay the father, you were in trouble. And he had a right, according to the tradition, to track you down and kill you, including the daughter, which he probably didn't usually kill. But the groom, he would. So Quanah is not your ordinary 21-year-old man. Now, he already knows a lot. Are you getting the idea that I admire this guy? Right? He got together 21 of his buddies, the young warriors been raiding with him, and the bride, and they went south. I think Shannon knows how they travel with those horses. I think we talked about this. But those Mustangs could go and go and go. If you kept the right pace, which they called a long shot or long trot. And it was one they could hold up, and they only slowed down to get a drink of water and cross the stream. And they could go for like 2 days and 2 nights or something like that, sometimes 3. So they traveled that way till they got pretty far south, and he set up camp. And as he told it later, the quote was, "We set up camp and we went to stealing horses." And they did that. So now they're living there for 1 or 2 years. In the meantime, a lot of his buddies are going back to the camp, getting their brides, and coming and joining him, because this is the new world. We're freer. We don't want to be in that big old camp with those daughter-in-law chiefs, you know, and we'll make our fortune in horses, right, and our fame. So by the time the father, it was at least 1 year, maybe 2 years later, by the time the father said, "I got to do something," you know, and everybody knew where they were now. So the father got together what he thought was an adequate force, and they went down there to Quanah's camp. And when he got near the camp, what he ran into was a semicircle of 100 young warriors, arrayed with their armor and their paint and all that. And old guy said, "Whoa." He wasn't ready to fight, so he said, "We're going to parley." So they set up, and I think 3 or 4 days, they sent emissaries. It's like ambassadors. You know, what's that called? Negotiation with strength, right? So he displayed his strength out here, and he sent, you know, the negotiator. And they like to parlay, you know, talk, smoke, and BS and all that. So they finally came to an agreement that saved face for the father, basically. 19 horses. I'm guessing that Quanah made it 19 because it wasn't 20. It wasn't even 20, which he, you know. But anyway, they made the deal. For 19 horses, they could all come back to the village full status, all forgiven. So as soon as the father's gang was making dust going back, Quanah said, "I know a ranch nearby where I can get 19 horses before we go back." So that's what he did. There were many, many battles. You can see this map. I started out wanting to highlight the battle, and I would have covered up the whole damn map. But most of the later years, they occurred up in here anyway. But I guess I can backtrack. Now, the novelists do this and the movie makers do this. So I can flash back, huh? That just to kind of show you how the Comanches fought, there was a time in the Sam Houston days when they had what they called a council house fight. It was near San Antonio or near Austin.
In San Antonio.
In San Antonio.
Yeah. Okay. And they had supposed to have been an agreement that this is in the Lamar days now, after Sam Houston's first term. Lamar was the only good Indian's a dead Indian guy. And he was treacherous, actually. There's more to that story, Larry, that happened over here, too. Whole different story. But it was basically Lamar's time. So the Indians came, and they thought they were going to negotiate there, but the Texans had decided that they should told them they should bring captives back before we talk. Well, the Indians weren't ready to bring them back. They wanted to deal more, but they came back without the captives, and they got slaughtered, basically, right? And so as a retaliation for that, I think I got the right times right. They, one of the long-range raids I just wanted to cover to show how well they could do with those Mustang ponies and bows, arrows, and a lance. I think the chief who escaped this, he had one of his dreams. You know, he did his smoking and his fasting, and he had a dream about what he wanted to do, and he wanted to drive these damn Texans into the sea. He damn near did it. He went from way up there somewhere and raided Victoria. But when he got to Victoria, it was a nice little town. He could have burned it and all that, but he wasn't at the sea yet. So he pressed on till he got to Linville, Texas, which, by the way, doesn't exist anymore, they say. It was like a port city, warehouses for Victoria. And they apparently took so much booty there. There was things like bolts of cloth that they needed. Barrel hoops were a big deal for Comanches because they, never mind the flint arrowheads, they could make a good arrowhead out of a barrel hoop, cut it out, sharpen it, and when it hit a bone in your body, it would bend and wreak all kinds of havoc, being taken out or pull off and rust in you or something like that. So anyway, they loaded up with too much stuff, and they got caught and had a big battle on the way back. And that one didn't work too well. But I'm just trying to show you how far they can maneuver.
I have a question.
Okay.
With all of these horses and them being so nomadic, how did they feed that many horses? Did they?
That's why they moved. They moved every few days or week. And those horses could live on only grass. That was the big advantage. And that was one of their advantages against the Army later. The Army had better horses for most purposes, you know, like Kentucky bred, that kind of stuff. And but they needed grain, and a horse had to have a supply. Army had to have a supply train, you know, a supply camp. Mm-hmm. And if they ranged too far out chasing those Indians, they got in trouble. And that's one of the ways. I know I had to double check that 3,000 horses. I couldn't hardly believe it. Yeah. But it's amazing. This would be a big village. And also, I did cover this. I apologize for my backtracking. But there were 5 main groups of Comanches here. You had your Yamparicos, your Cosotecas, Naconis, Quahatis, which was Quanas Bunch, and the Pinatacas. And they were all Comanches. They had the same language, and they would work together, but not always. You know, they camped separately. A lot of this reasons for their success was all the space they had. They had a lot of space to escape. They had a lot of space to follow buffalo and feed their horses, all that. Now, Quanah did a lot of this fighting after he became a young chief, that he learned more and more and more. But finally, I'll cover the Battle of Blanco Canyon, which is when he was 23. And the Colonel McKenzie, he was almost a contemporary of the famous Custer. He graduated West Point in 1861. Mackenzie did. First in his class of 30-some. Custer graduated the next year, last in his class, because he had so damn many demerits. But Mackenzie was so successful during the Civil War that he went from a second lieutenant in 62. How would you like to graduate at that phase of the Civil War? To call a brevet general in the Army. Veterans here might know that, but you know, you had a permanent grade, and then if exigencies of the service, you might get promoted to something higher. If your boss got killed, you might get promoted to take his place. So in the Civil War, he became some kind of general, like a 1-star, I guess. But after the war, they all went back to captain, you know, Custer and him too. But Ulysses Grant was so impressed with his war record that he put him out here to fight these damn Comanches. So he spent several years doing that. And I like to quote somebody who said that the U.S. Army in those years, Quanah's years, spent most of their time not finding Indians because there was so much wide open spaces, and as I've said over and over, they were so good at melting away that they could just outrun. And Quanah said at one time that one of these times that Mackenzie chased him all winter, he said we had scouts out, and every time we knew they were coming, we'd just pick up and move. And they could, they could travel better, easier, faster. In spite of taking the whole damn village with them. But Blanco Canyon, now let me get on that. Mackenzie went with 600 men, 25 Tonka was scouts. And this time they found Quahatis. So they camped like the Army does, tied up the horses, Shanna. They'd have a picket line. The damn Army would have I don't know how much it weighed, but a 14-inch iron stake that they would hobble them to. Well, that's part of what they had to haul, And so Quanah stampeded the horses, and I don't know that they did this time because of the pickets, but they had a way. They were so well trained and attuned to the horses, they could go in that horse place and stay down low and crawl among the horses, untie them, so that when they were ready to stampede them, they could all run. But this time, because they had the pickets, a lot of them were flailing around with those pickets, and the soldiers were having to they got ordered to go get some damn horses, and here that was, the pickets flailing around. Let's see, where was I? At that time, Quanah also did something that they didn't normally do. He rode right through the camp, like a stampeded horse, and rode through the camp, almost knocked the colonel's tent down, they say. And this was the time, I believe, when, the horses were scattered. Soldiers sent out a couple of detachments to try to get some horses back. And they were chasing, the detachment would find 6 or 8 warriors there leading horses. And they said, okay, we got them, And they would spur up and gonna go get those. And sure enough, the young men would drop the tow rope from the horses and like they were running. And they'd get the detachment up a certain distance. And then they would see that those guys are turning on us. And what's that behind them? Oh my God, it's the main band. And so they, that was a little trick they used. And Army's hard to teach, right? And they didn't learn from that. It's exactly what got Custer later on. Custer, this happened to him once, and he escaped, and he didn't even learn. And it happened to him up there in Little Bighorn. That part of his initial problem that caused him to split his forces. And another story. That was a little later. But that's the way Quanah adapted to the situation he was in, as I've told you 2 or 3 times already. I believe this is the time. Yes, this is the time then that Mackenzie got to the whole village, and he was pursuing them, tracking them, and they were up there in the Blanco Canyon, which is one of these. One of these canyons that was there's 4 forks to the Red River up in there, and the Paladuro is one of them, but there's other canyons there. So he would chase them up this canyon, track them, I guess you call it chasing. But Quanah would take the whole village and move and go up one of those side canyons, and the Tonkawa scouts would track them. And even I could track a herd of horses and the tracks, travois tracks in the ground. And they'd track them. And then all of a sudden they would find a place where they had split and done this. And so they'd have to figure out which way they went and lose a little time there. Finally, they would get to the top. I believe a lot of you probably know better than me that there's that cap rock where the high plains start, and sometimes out of the canyon on that side it's 1,000 feet up, and it's a different, what they call the high plains in West Texas. But Quanah would take them up there and cross-track up there on the plains, and they'd get up there and finally find the track, and find it. My God, he went back down another canyon. So they would have to take this whole damn army apparatus back down, and he basically ran circles around it. This is with his village now. And so the last time, I think at least 2 times he did that, back down, back up. And then they started heading away over the plains. And the weather started looking bad to the northwest. And they were heading straight in it. And the Colonel Mackenzie was following them. I'm going to get them this time. And it turns out that it was a blue norther. It was a Texas Panhandle blue norther that Quanah and his camp just went straight in it and got lost in it and ahead of them. And Mackenzie had to give up again. So this time, one of Mackenzie's captains, who wrote some memoirs later, lamented the fact that they didn't get him this time back to Fort Sill, which is what their reservation at Fort Sill, which was what their goal was, because it took 3 more years. Now, I don't know if I credit the Blue Norther with saving him. I think he would have escaped anyway. Once he got the army worn out doing that, with their pickets and their other stuff, and headed across the plains, I think he would have outrun them again. But anyway, he did escape, and they fought for 3 more years. I guess I should skip on up to the stopwatch me, to what's called the Red River Wars. And wars, the U.S. Army called it wars. Really, it was a whole bunch of skirmishes, but it worked for their purposes. Here's what they had to do in order to do this, which is what that captain I was talking about, who lamented after that we didn't get him in 1871, we had to wait to 74, and we had to use columns of forces from 4 directions to do it. They had, Mackenzie had 3 of them went from some fort down here, up there. Another one went from Fort Sill that way, and there was an extra one that went in between them here, which apparently they joined up somewhere. And then one came from Fort Dodge, Kansas, and another one from Santa Fe. So that's what it took to get them. And they still didn't get Quanah, okay? They got all the rest of them. They forced them, starved them, forced them out till they went basically to the reservation at Fort Sill. But not Quanah and his band. He lived another winter. He lived a hard winter, but they survived it. So by this time, poor old Mackenzie, poor guy, he worked for the Army, so he deserved. But he was ready to chase Quanah one more time. He knew where they were, and he was on the track. And the poor guy, he got orders from on high to stop that and go take charge of the reservation at Fort Sill. So he had to turn back. I don't know if he would have got him or not, but he had to turn back. But after he got to Fort Sill, took over and learned what all the situation was, he sent emissaries to Quanah. By now, he had learned some respect for Quanah. And he sent emissaries to get them to turn themselves in peacefully. And Quanah had to negotiate with some of his own group who wanted to fight on, but he read the handwriting on the wall, and he knew it was time. And he agreed to go into Fort Sill. So they took some time, I think some weeks, to go from up in here to Fort Sill, because the horses were tired, they were worn out, people were tired and worn out and starving. And also, I like to believe they knew it was their last free trip, and they took their time. They'd kill a buffalo if they could, eat a horse if they had to, and their last soiree kind of. And so he went in to Fort Sill, and Colonel Mackenzie wrote a letter that he had sent the emissaries, and they were coming in, letter to his bosses. And he said, I admire this band and more than all the others that we've dealt with. And I am going to let him down as easy as I can. And actually he did. He got Quanah's band in there, and instead of throwing them in the prison that they had, that they'd throw meat over the wall to feed them and keep them from escaping. And they were not jailed. They just were able to camp there. And that's just an example of how he was treated differently than most of the previous ones. And that's where I am, you guys, to the turn-in. There's a lot more to the story. I don't know if you want to hear it. You want me just to summarize the after?
I just think you've done such an amazing job. We're gonna have to do this again.
Yeah.
Because you, I mean, just,
Well,
I
yeah,
mean,
I,
he's just done such a good job.
yeah, I want to give a choice because I know my monotone may have put some of you to sleep. In fact, like a preacher, I've caught some of you. Right? But
That's 2 o'clock, that's
yeah.
nap time.
but anyway, there's a pretty long story. This, by the way, when this happened, how old do you think he was? He was 27. He'd already done a pretty good war.
I thought it was always amazing that the pictures of Paul Parker, he does not look like he has any white blood in him at all.
Well,
He looks deep Indian.
actually, some people disagree with that. Some people think that because we all thought of him as the quintessential noble warrior, definitely do. It's because his nose is like his white family, but everything else was like an Indian, except he was damn big. He was huge. On those little ponies, you know, one of those pictures, his foot almost drags the ground. He's huge. He was huge, but he still could move like a little 150-pound warrior. But I guess I got it across that I admire that guy. I liked him a lot.
Gary,
But
do you
it,
think we could maybe even consider like pausing now and then coming back together? To
absolutely,
do Haunted
absolutely.
Part 2?
Sure, I don't know if we'll get anybody
Haunted
back.
Part 2? Oh, I don't know.
Huh?
You gotta keep them
Raise your
intrigued.
hand, raise your hand if you'd like to come back for Part 2.
Okay,
All right.
okay. It's a pretty long story for the reservation days and how he adjusted. Just a little preview. That once he decided to be what some of the captains and sergeants who had fought him, they were kind of irritated that he became a good Indian and he was a hero to us, But the colonel here, he understood. He
Sort
had,
of got into
had-
politics there.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. He learned how to negotiate out there on the field. And he negotiated with just a little tidbit, so maybe you come back. He took, what's his name who did the, Teddy Roosevelt. He took Teddy Roosevelt on a wolf hunt.
Yeah.
He had all kinds of adventures after he
Okay, I'm
was.
gonna make you stop because
Okay,
you're telling too
I'm
many cool
stopping.
things, and then you're gonna have.
Well, that was
I
just
mean,
a damn little tidbit to get him back.
Don't-
Don't give away the
Okay.
whole
You gotta know
thing.
why it is.
I won't. There's a whole lot more story.
You got us where you want us.
He lived from 27 to 60 some.
All right.
He had a longer life after that.
And,
Okay, you guys. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Thank you, Gary, for
Oh,
doing
okay.
this, and I think maybe we might need to make this a regular,
Yeah,
have
okay.
Story time with Gary.
Well, we
I
get
know you
left.
all need to run, but I just wanted to let you know, real quick, commercial, another one. We're gonna have a special activity on St. Patrick's Day, which is on a Sunday. We're gonna have an amazing opportunity. We're gonna have little boxes of St. Patrick's Day, especially dedicated to meal that you can pick up at the museum, and we're gonna send more information out about it. But we're trying to raise money for technology for the museum. We're trying to get some screens, and so we can show pictures of Zeke's jewelry and the Potter Browns and all the things that happens down at Joe's. We want to get a video of Joe doing one of his paintings. It's right here, and also we're giving away, anybody that would like an edom button is right here. We're doing the donation, but if you'll look at the Facebook site for the Edom Historical Museum and Visitor Center, we'll have information about the St. Patrick's Day and upcoming other events. And once again, everybody, let's give a round of applause to Gary Hayes.
Hey, you could let the usher pass the plate around. Huh?
I know, I thought it looked kind of like one of the ones from.
Yeah, just like church,
Let's just pass it around. There we go.
Oh.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Craig, for doing this.